Hello everyone, my name is Jason and I am an ISFP. You are watching my ISFP journey. Thank you so much for watching. While you're here and watching this video, let me ask you please to subscribe to this channel of mine, this YouTube channel, my ISFP journey. I would appreciate that greatly. Let's talk about, pardon me, ISTPs and INTPs. What are the similarities and the differences? How can you differentiate between whether or not someone is an INTP or an ISTP? Now, I have the privilege of knowing multiple ISTPs. However, so far as I know, I don't know any female ISTPs. So I don't know how being an ISTP may show up a little differently. On the INTP side, I do know people of both genders, so that is helpful information for me. But let's talk about some differences and similarities. First of all, both ISTPs and INTPs have introverted thinking as their hero or their first function. Now, introverted thinking is very concerned with logic, with understanding, with truth and error, correct or incorrect, intelligence versus lack of knowledge or stupidity. I think with both the INTP and the ISTP, one of the worst insults that you could levy at them would be to say that they are stupid. First of all, they're probably not stupid, but what I'm trying to say by pointing that out is that both the INTP and the ISTP place a very high value on intelligence. And so it is an affront to them if someone were to suggest that either the INTP or the ISTP is lacking in this area. I think there are few insults that you could throw at either one of these personality types that would hurt them more. Now, that intelligence that they have, while being of the utmost importance for both of them, is applied very differently for the ISTP than it is for the INTP. So for the INTP, they have extraverted intuition as their parent or their second function. So extraverted intuition is very theoretical. It's very not as concerned with the here and now or with the real even, than as it is concerned with the what if, the big picture, big ideas, future concepts, and a lot of times very abstract concepts. So the INTP is going to be applying their knowledge and their intelligence to abstract concepts and theoretical ideas. Whereas the ISTP, with extroverted sensing as their parent function or their second function, is very concerned with the real, with the here and now, with the physical, tangible. And so the ISTP is going to be applying his or her intelligence and logic to the physical world, the real world. So to try to put this into some sort of picture that you can imagine, an INTP may be able to do a deep dive and thorough explanation of all of the scientific laws that govern the universe in Doctor Who, but may not be able to tell you why, when you turn the key in your ignition, it makes the car start. Now, obviously, these are just meant to be examples. I'm not saying every INTP is a fanboy or fangirl of fiction, and I'm not saying every INTP has no firm knowledge of the physical world. But the INTP will tend to be more fascinated by the theoretical and by the intricate concepts that may govern either a real world, but our real world, but in an abstract concept or an abstract field of science or knowledge or endeavor. And they're likely to be less concerned with the actual physical world in which they live. Now, if we contrast that with the ISTP is going to take their love of information, their love of knowledge, same as the INTP, but they're going to be applying it much more to the physical world. So an ISTP may be able to explain why the gear ratio in your transmission needs to be exactly what it is for your vehicle to work. However, that same ISTP may not be as concerned with great philosophical ideologies or scientific concepts that are difficult to visualize or that cannot be held in the hands and seen in some sort of tangible form. Another major difference that you'll see between the INTP and the ISTP is not, at least for me, it's not something that I can directly attribute to any one cognitive function. And if it's attributable to a combination of cognitive functions, I'm not sure that I can put my finger on what that combination is. But what it comes down to is their manner of speaking. INTPs are informative. And what that means is they will give you a lot of information when they're speaking with you. So an INTP will tend to use a lot of words to say just a few thoughts. And by the way, ISFPs do the exact same thing. So I know how that feels. There's something for me anyway as an ISFP where I have this feeling like I need to be beyond any doubt that my hearer understands exactly what I'm trying to say. And so I will say what I mean, but then I may repeat it again in a different way, and I may even repeat it a third time in a different way because it is so important to me that my hearer understand. INTPs will do the same thing. They will use a lot of words to convey their idea. An ISTP, on the other hand, has a much more direct pattern of speech. They're going to usually say what they need to say in very few words. They're going to say what they mean and mean what they say. Both of them, interestingly enough, in my experience, have sometimes maybe a little bit, they're a little bit lacking in the awareness of how they come across. So an INTP can speak to someone in a manner that might especially to someone like me, like an ISFP, who's very cautious to make sure I frame every single thing that I say in a way that it's going to be the least offensive, right? INTPs use a lot of words like ISFPs do, but they're not necessarily always the most tactful communicators. So they do tend to hurt people's feelings and come off as rude to some people. I've seen countless INTPs say that their whole lives they've been accused of being rude and they don't know why. With the ISTP, they also can sometimes have a lack of tact and be very, I don't want to say very, but can sometimes come across as being rude or offensive as well. But it's for the same reason, even though their communication style is different. The INTP will say a lot of words, the ISTP will say few words, but neither one of them is always completely dialed in or tuned in to how they're being received by their hearers. But while both of them may seem a little less than tactful at times, one of the easy ways to tell them apart is that the INTP is going to go on and on with words, much like I just did for the last minute and a half, whereas the ISTP would be more apt to say, yeah, INTPs talk a lot and ISTPs don't. Okay, there you go. That's all you need to know. And that is a significant difference between the two. So if you have someone you're trying to determine, is this person an INTP or an ISTP, listen for their communication style. Do they say a lot? INTP, or do they say very few words? ISTP. Are they very concerned with figuring out abstract concepts? INTP, or are they very much plugged into the physical world, the here and now? ISTP. Another thing that is a difference between them is their third function. So the ISTP has Introverted Intuition as his or her third function, or child function, and the INTP has introverted sensing. So these are two extremely different functions in my understanding of them, and in the way I see it play out. It's very fascinating to me because I, like the ISTP, have introverted intuition as my third function. My wife, who is an INFP, has introverted sensing as her third function, which is what INTPs have as their third function. So when I look at some of the differences between myself and my wife, my ISFP self and my INFP wife, I can see some of the differences that would show right up between an ISTP and an INTP. So an ISTP tends to be a little bit more, in my mind, a little bit more focused on doing what they want to do and accomplishing what they want to accomplish. They don't like to be bothered when they're trying to do what they want to do. And the end result of what they're trying to do tends to be for them. It's not to say that they're not going to take whatever it is that they produce and roll it out there to their group and go, look at this, isn't this awesome? But they're really producing what they're producing for them. So an ISTP might become a great mechanic, and a big part of that is, okay, I'm going to be a mechanic because I can make money off of this, but they may love cars. And so by being a mechanic, they can engulf themselves in something that they love, cars and so on and so forth. And they're gaining the joy from it. They're gaining the fulfillment from it. And it doesn't necessarily matter a great deal to what degree it benefits or affects the group, okay? With ISFPs, with INTPs having introverted sensing as their third function, they're not as, I find that they're not quite as self-focused as the ISTP. And I know that can sound like I'm trying to be critical of the ISTP by saying they're self-focused, but I as an ISFP am exactly the same way. I do what I do for myself because I want to, okay? And so you ISTPs out there, if you're hearing this, I'm not criticizing you. I totally relate to you. But I think the INTP, even though I think they get a bad rap in this area, I do think the INTP is a little bit more others focused. I think they're a little bit more quick to look for opportunities to help other people or benefit other people, maybe a little bit faster than the ISTP will. Now, I think the ISTP loves to help. I think they love to impart that knowledge. I think they love to show that knowledge and benefit others through it. But I think it's a little bit more on their own terms and a little bit more according to their own convenience. An INTP maybe just a little bit can be inconvenienced a little bit more without quite as negative of a reaction, okay? So I know these are broad generalizations. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings here. And there I go with my ISFP tiptoeing on eggshells with everything that I say because I don't want to upset anybody. But anyway, in my experience, the ISTP is just a little bit more self-focused than the INTP, all right? So, and then both of them, by the way, have this extroverted feeling as their final function. And I think, again, that really does come out similarly in both of them. Both of them tend to communicate through a lens of more of a sterile communication style. The INTP may not come off feeling as sterile sometimes because they're informative, because they use so many words to say what they want to say. So they might feel a little bit more warmed up and opened up. I think sometimes ISTPs, in my experience, their emotion comes out a little bit more, and that extroverted feeling or taking on the value judgments of the tribe comes out more in like big waves of it, okay? And I guess that's probably true for the INTP as well. But I find INTPs to be maybe just a little bit more sort of silly and, a little bit more go with the tribe or the group a little bit. That kind of thing. The ISTPs are certainly capable of doing that. There's no doubt about it, but it does come out just slightly differently in that I feel like the INTP may be just a little bit more warm at times, and the ISTP, they can certainly warm up, be extremely funny people. But when they're plugged into something, when they're working on something especially, maybe that's where the real difference is. When an ISTP is working on something, just leave them the heck alone, okay? They don't want to be bothered. And if you want to feel any of that warmth that they have, maybe when they're in the middle of a task is not the best time to approach them to try to get that, okay? Because they're going to want to be dialed in on what they're doing. And that really leads me to, I think probably what I'll say is the last major difference that I want to point out. I think both the INTP and the ISTP can get lost in, I'm not going to say their head, but it could seem that way. The INTP can get lost in their head for sure. Okay, with that extroverted intuition, they can get off into abstract land. They can either be staring at their computer, researching some topic that probably would bore the living tar out of most of us, but they're going to need a minimum of 50 to 70 hours of research on that topic because it's so fascinating to them. And they can just vanish, right? Go off into their room, pull up their computer, and you never see them, like you don't see them forever. And they're lost in sort of a theoretical dream world of the what if possibilities, or the trying to understand some deep not theological, that's a separate issue. Could be theological, but deep philosophical concept or deep scientific concept that requires extremely deep dives to get a hold of. The ISTP can get lost too, but more from it's not a lostness in theory land, but more being lost to what's going on around them because they're so focused on something in the physical world, okay? So whatever it is that they're working on, like imagine that they're trying to learn how to play guitar and they're so focused on learning this one guitar method or this one song or this one chord or whatever it is, that they're just shutting out the whole world around them. And if you approach them while they're in this zone, they're not going to be very happy with you, okay? So the ISTP, when they get lost from the world around them and they want to push the world around them away, is because they're so focused on trying to figure out something in the physical world that they're trying to master. The INTP can get just sort of daydream type lost in theory land and or lost in their study of some concept that has just so fascinated them that they can't break away from it until they understand every last minor detail of how it works so that they can be amazing experts on it. And maybe there is one more thing now that I think about it. With the INTP, when they do that, when they go into that deep dive of understanding, for the most part, when they're done, they're done. That's all they needed. They just wanted to understand it to its most thorough degree. They don't necessarily need to teach anyone else what they've learned. They don't necessarily need to do anything with what they've learned. They just want to know it. With an ISTP, their knowledge tends to be more applied. They want to master something. They want to know everything that they can know about how this computer program works so that they can have mastered it and been the absolute best operator of that computer program that has ever walked planet Earth. Or if they want to learn to, play the piano, if that's something that matters to them, they're not just gonna learn to play the piano so they can go, oh, look at me, I can play the piano. They're going to want to master the piano so they can be the best pianist who has ever walked planet Earth, okay? Now, again, all of these things that I'm saying are generalizations, and there are always going to be exceptions to every rule. But if you're trying to determine the difference between an INTP and an ISTP, these are some of the things that I myself would be on the lookout for, and I'm hoping that this information is helpful to you as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you did find this helpful, useful, or if you found it totally useless, but at least entertaining for some crazy reason, then would you please hit the like button. If you have not subscribed to my channel, would you please subscribe to my channel? I think both INTPs and ISTPs with their extreme intelligence would suggest that that's the smart thing to do. So please subscribe to my channel. And would you also consider sharing this on social media with your friends? Thank you so much for watching and have yourself a wonderful day. Bye now.